A subconjunctival hemorrhage looks very impressive, but it almost always looks worse than it really is. So what is this? Invariably, maybe once or twice a week, I'll have a patient come in and say, my eye looks incredibly red. I don't know what happened. I just woke up. I looked in the mirror, and I have tons of redness over here to the side, and no other symptoms. No change in vision. The eye's not really that irritated, but it looks just awful. Well, this is what we call a subconjunctival hemorrhage. The conjunctiva is that thin layer of skin on the white part of the eye, and there are little blood vessels in it, and if one of these little blood vessels pop, all it takes is about half a drop of blood under the skin to track under here and make the eye look incredibly red. So let's look at a video of this. So this is an eye looking down, and you can see there's little blood vessels here running through that skin, and you can imagine that there's blood running through here, and if this ruptures, then it tracks under the skin. So here's a kind of a neat video. I did some fancy stuff with the computer to magnify this, but you can actually see those little blood cells, individual cells running through that little network here, and if this ruptures, spreads over the eye, looks very red. If this was to happen anywhere else in the body, you might have a little tiny bruise, but when it happens on the eye, it looks very impressive because you have that white background, so it really makes red stand out, and of course the eyes are a focus of attention. So, what causes this bleeding? Usually, almost always, this happens sort of happenstance, just randomly. Maybe you cough harder than usual, sneeze harder than usual, rub the eyes a little bit. For some people, if you're on a blood thinner such as Coumadin, warfarin, Plavix, maybe it makes you a little bit predisposed to it. But majority of the time, people can't really identify anything that caused the bleeding. They didn't have any big problems. It just happens. The little blood vessels will pop. So this is a case where this is actually from trauma after a motor vehicle accident. You can see this redness right here is tracked under the skin. Looks very impressive. Fortunately, this redness will go away. It might take a couple weeks. It'll turn pink before long. Sometimes gravity will push it down below, and sometimes if it's bad enough, it will even go into the eyelids, kind of like here, but it will go away on its own. Hardly ever cause of any big problems. So, if you have a subconjunctival hemorrhage, what can you do to speed things up? Unfortunately, not a whole lot. There's not really any good way to make bruises go away faster. I usually recommend don't rub the eye. You don't want to irritate this and make it bleed more while it's healing. You may want to avoid blood thinners. I put a couple stars here because this is important. If you're on a blood thinner because you've got some kind of heart problem, prone to strokes or clotting, obviously stay on it. But if you're just taking a baby aspirin, just sort of a prophylactic kind of thing, you may want to stop until this redness goes away. I usually tell people, if you have a headache, don't take any aspirin or any Motrin because those have a little bit of a blood thinner in it. But Tylenol is probably okay because it doesn't really thin the blood. But when it comes down to it, the heart and your brain is more important than the eye. If you're on a blood thinner because you got some other underlying medical problem, stay on it. So, when should you see a doctor? Well, if you have any question that there's something going on in the eye, certainly come in. It's not good to self-diagnose these things, especially when it comes to the eye, because small insults to the eye can cause a lot of visual problems. Certainly, if there's any change in the vision, like any change, come on in. You want to make sure there's not bleeding inside the eye. Irritation. Sometimes if there's enough bleeding here, it'll kind of bulge the conjunctival skin forward, and you can get little pockets of drying and some other issues. So certainly come on in, make sure that's not what's going on. If you're on a lot of blood thinners, it might not be a bad idea to get checked out too, just to look into the back of the eye, make sure there's no bleeding in the retina. And certainly if you have any coexisting eye problems, probably better to be safe than sorry. Come on in, have us take a look, make sure there's nothing else going on.
For more informative videos like this, visit us at mpeg1at7k. Or if you would like to make an appointment to see one of our doctors, please call 386-672-4244.